Hi, everyone. I'm Rena 9, and it has been a long day in southeast Texas. Harvey, dumping so much rain, entire communities have been overwhelmed. Streets have been turned into fast-moving rivers. Homes in Houston and the surrounding area are flooded up to their attics, and thousands remain trapped. At least 2 people are dead, but that toll is expected to rise. And that's because crews have not yet been able to get to some of the hardest hit areas. There have already been up to 2,000 rescues in the Houston area alone, some by emergency crews, some just by neighbors, helping neighbors. Over 2 feet of rain has fallen just in the last 24 hours. By the time it's all over, up to 50 inches of rain may fall, and that is historic for the city of Houston and the entire state of Texas. That's the amount of rain they typically get in a year. And officials warn that the worst may be yet to come. The storm isn't going anywhere. The rain may last until Thursday. And there are also tornado warnings in effect across the region. So far, 18 counties in Texas are included in a federal disaster declaration, representing a quarter of the state's population. And there are more than 250 highway closures across the state. There are at least 338,000 power outages. And the Red Cross says they are serving 130,000 meals a day in the area to those displaced by the floods and by the initial impact of the storm. CBS News correspondent Mark Strassmann is in Houston. Mark, tell me, the National Weather Service says the rainfall is, quote, beyond anything they've experienced before. Can you describe for us what it's like out there right now?
Well, here's the good news, Rena, at least for those of us who are in Houston, it stopped. I mean, it stopped at least temporarily. There's a lull right now. There have been very few lulls over the last 36 hours or so here. I drove into the city last night, pounding rain, woke up this morning, pounding rain, and there's a lot more pounding rain in the forecast. If you look at the radar, pounding rain all the way at least through Wednesday. And so these people essentially know that as bad as it is, I think, as you just mentioned, it is going to get worse. There's no question about it. People whose homes are flooded, neighborhoods flooded, those homes are going to get worse because as the forecast has predicted, you're going to have all kinds of folks who need help. They've been trying to find high, dry ground wherever they can. And in some cases, that includes like going up to the attic, which is not always necessarily a great idea because if the floodwater rises, you've got no place to go unless you remember to bring an axe to go through to the roof. So lots of problems, lots of challenges here. But Rena, they think that they have enough resources to kind of get in place to respond to these challenges, but they know that there are a lot of challenges still to come.
Certainly a lot of challenges, and the rainfall, just incredible watching this video, Mark. No sign of letting up anytime soon. So tell me right now, what are the major concerns in this area as they're heading into the rest of the week?
Well, I think the major concern is that you have an emergency system that is just overwhelmed with calls. So much so that these first responders have to prioritize the life and death calls that they get. So the definition of what constitutes an emergency here keeps rising with the water. For instance, you got a couple inches of water in your house and your neighbors all have the same. That's not an emergency anymore. What is an emergency is if you're up in the attic and all of a sudden you notice the water is continuing to rise and you're trapped. Now that is an emergency. So they had to try to figure out, we have a finite number of resources. We have a seemingly infinite number of people who want access to those resources. How do we make sure that the right people get the right help in the right quick time? And that is a singular challenge here. The other challenge here, Arena, is just logistics. I mean, getting from point A to point B, you know, that line, you can't get here, you can't get there from here. That's very much true here because there are so many spots in this city that are virtual islands surrounded by water, and you really have an extraordinarily difficult time making what should be a 10-minute drive, which can quickly turn into a 2-hour drive, unless you luck into some street that was maybe a little bit higher elevation, and so the floodwaters haven't completely washed it away. So lots of challenges here, and as the city wakes up to a Monday morning work week, they are facing not just an extraordinary week, but a potentially traumatic week as well, because, I mean, everybody sort of expects that the issues are going to rise, and the hope here is that the death toll does not.
I know, it is just incredible watching these images, Mark, and it just it's so devastating as well. I want to ask you, is there any criticism? Did the Democratic mayor of Houston do enough? There weren't mandatory evacuations. Are people saying that there should have been?
Well, you know, it's certainly easy to second guess these things. That was also the case, as we all know, in New Orleans with Katrina. By the time the evacuation order was given in New Orleans, it was the morning that Katrina was coming. Heading to New Orleans' way, and of course by then it was too late. And so there's going to be some second guessing here. I mean, not for me to say whether the evacuation order should have been given earlier, but it is, I'll tell you this much. This is one of those disasters where they knew it was coming, so they could plan for it. So then they had to decide, okay, what sort of preemptive steps do we want to take to mitigate things, to try to minimize the pain? A lot of people are now questioning whether evacuations should have been part of that plan, and the second guessing is bound to go on, particularly in those neighborhoods where people woke up this morning and suddenly they were surrounded by water, and in some cases living in water, and wish that perhaps they had been told to get out while they still could. And
it's just the beginning. The President of the United States will travel there on Tuesday as well. Mark Strassmann, thank you very much for that report.